All right, ready for a deep dive into something pretty interesting. We're talking about botulinum toxin today,
Botulinum toxin.
but not for wrinkles this time.
Right.
We're going to be talking about how it's used to treat overactive bladder, OAB.
Yeah, interesting area.
It is, yeah. And we're looking at a study that was published this year in BJUI Compass, which is a urology journal.
Mm-hmm.
And what's wild about this study is that they followed these patients for 10 cycles of treatment.
10, wow, yeah.
Yeah.
10, that's a long time.
It is. It's a long time to be looking at, the effects of anything. So, yeah, it's pretty interesting to see kind of how it played out.
Yeah, so it gives us a lot of insights
Yeah, definitely.
into how the botulinum toxin works.
Exactly, over time.
Over time.
Yeah.
And specifically, they were looking at two different groups of patients. They were looking at people with MS, multiple sclerosis,
Yeah.
who often experience OAB as a symptom.
Mm-hmm.
And they were also looking at people with what's called idiopathic OAB.
Right. So that means we don't really know what's causing it.
Right, exactly.
Unknown causes.
Yep.
So by comparing these two groups, researchers were able to look at whether or not having a condition like MS
Mm-hmm.
affects how well the treatment works
Right.
and how long the effects last.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So this is a pretty big study. It's not just like a few
Uh-huh.
people.
No, it was 792 patients.
792 patients total.
Wow. Yeah, pretty big.
104 of those folks had MS,
Okay,
and 688 had idiopathic OAB.
got it.
And they tracked like everything,
Pretty much.
like dosage, how effective it was, how long it lasted,
Mm-hmm.
any complications, quality of life.
Yeah, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, it was very thorough.
Sounds like it.
So good news first. Did botulinum toxin help?
Yeah, it did.
Awesome.
It did.
For both groups.
Yeah, for both groups.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, and it significantly helped with the OAB symptoms in both groups.
Great.
Yeah, they found that the botulinum toxin injections were, very effective in helping to reduce those symptoms.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And the patients reported that the treatment was effective.
Yeah.
So they actually felt relief.
Yeah, which is always good. That's what we want to see.
Now, one thing that I found interesting in this
Yeah.
was that the MS patients
Mm-hmm.
reported even higher effectiveness
Oh, interesting.
in those first 3 cycles of treatment compared to the idiopathic OAB group.
Huh. I wonder why that is.
Yeah, I wonder if it has to do with the way that the nervous system is affected in MS,
That's possible, yeah.
maybe,
Yeah,
or how the toxin interacts with the bladder muscles in people with MS.
yeah, could be.
So that's
This
kind
is
of
something to look into more.
worth exploring further. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we know it works,
Yeah.
but the next big question, of course,
That's
is for
the-
how long?
Right.
We're talking about 10 cycles of treatment here.
I know. It's a long time. So did it last? I mean, did it work for all 10?
Well, that's where it gets, I guess, a little bit more complex.
Yeah.
On average, the effects of the botulinum toxin lasted between 4.5 and 9 months for both groups.
Okay. That's not bad.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Not bad at all.
However,
Oh,
the duration tended to decrease over time,
okay.
and that was particularly true for the MS patients.
So it's working less and less well over time.
Yeah, kinda.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
So for those with MS, the median duration,
Okay.
meaning the mid, well, figure that one out.
Yeah. Always more research.
So it might not be a permanent solution,
Okay.
but it does seem to offer some pretty good relief,
Yeah.
at least for a while.
For a while. What
So-
about dosage? Did they need to increase the dosage as they went through these 10 cycles?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what they found was that the MS patients needed a higher dose of the botulinum toxin compared to the idiopathic group
Okay.
throughout the entire study. And both groups had to have their dosage increased over time.
So it's like as the effectiveness wore off, they needed more
They needed more to get the same, to get the same
to
result.
get the same result.
Yeah, interesting.
Not ideal.
Not ideal, but at least it's still,
It's still working.
yeah, it's still working.
That's good.
Yeah.
What about complications?
Yeah.
Were there any negative side effects?
Yeah, there were some. And this is where having MS seemed to make a difference.
Okay.
Yeah. So it seems like there's some give and take here.
Yeah.
You might get some relief from OAB,
Mm-hmm.
but you might need higher doses
Yeah.
and more frequent treatment.
Right.
And then there's also the chance of complications,
Mm-hmm.
especially for those with MS.
Right. Exactly.
So what does all of this mean for someone listening who's struggling with overactive bladder?
Well,
Maybe they're thinking about trying botulinum toxin
sure.
as a treatment option.
Yeah, so I think the main takeaway is that this research really helps us understand the long-term effects
Oh,
of using this for OAB.
Mm-hmm.
And it shows us that it could be a good option for both MS patients and people with idiopathic OAB.
Okay.
And it offers some pretty good symptom relief for months at a time.
Right.
But it also, really highlights how important it is to work with your doctor
Yes.
to figure out what's best for you,
Absolutely.
because everyone's different.
Your doctor can assess your individual situation.
Exactly.
They can take into account your medical history and help you decide if it's right for you.
Yeah, and they can also talk to you about other options like
Oh.
lifestyle changes, pelvic floor exercises, maybe
Mhm.
some medications,
Yeah.
and kind of how all of that might work together for you.
So if you're dealing with OAB and you're trying to figure out what to do, this is definitely worth talking about with your doctor.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, for our listeners with MS who are thinking about botulinum toxin, are there some important things to remember based on what we learned in this study?
Yeah, I mean, the study kind of points out a few things.
Okay.
First, you might need higher doses of the toxin to get the same relief from symptoms as someone without MS.
Okay.
And it might not last as long, meaning you might have to get injections more often.
Got it.
So it's good to have realistic expectations.
Yeah, and there's the higher risk of things like UTIs and problems urinating.
Right, which could mean needing a catheter.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. So it's really important to have open conversations with your doctor.
Yes.
Talk about the pros and cons, really weigh everything out and, make the decision together.
That's right.
And remember, this study gives us a lot of helpful information, but it doesn't replace what your doctor can tell you for your specific case.
It's great to learn about this stuff.
Yeah,
But you also have to trust your medical professionals.
exactly.
This study focused on the physical effects of treating OAB with botulinum toxin.
Right.
But I think there's another side to this that we don't always talk about.
Oh, yeah.
What about the psychology of living with this?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You can't just treat the physical part.
Right.
You have to look at the whole person.
Exactly.
It can be so stressful to live with OAB. You're always worried about accidents. You have to plan your whole day around going to the bathroom.
Right.
It affects your social life, your relationships. It really takes a toll on you mentally.
And can you imagine how much harder it is for people with MS?
Oh, absolutely.
They're already dealing with the unpredictability of MS,
Mm.
the physical limitations, the ups and downs.
Yeah.
And then they have OAB on top of all of that.
It's like a double whammy.
It is.
Yeah, it really makes you think about how important it is to provide care that helps people in all these different ways.
Right. Not just physically, but emotionally, too.
Right.
So this study tells us a lot about how well botulinum toxin works in the long run
Mm-hmm.
and what the risks might be.
Yeah,
But it also makes you think about the bigger picture.
it does.
How do we help people cope emotionally with OAD,
That's the question.
whether they have MS or not?
Yeah,
What kind of resources are out there? What kind of support do they need?
absolutely.
I think those are important questions that we should be focusing on.
Yeah, definitely. We need more research into what it's really like to live with OAB.
Mm-hmm.
How do people deal with it day to day? What helps them get through it?
Exactly.
We need to understand all of that.
And we need to think about how to better support them, not just with medicine, but with emotional and social support too,
100%. And we can't forget about the caregivers either.
right?
They're so important.
They are.
And they need support too.
That's right.
They're going through a lot as well.
OAB doesn't just affect the person who has it,
Yeah.
it affects everyone around them.
Exactly.
So we need to be thinking about the whole support system
Absolutely.
instead of just focusing on getting rid of symptoms.
Yeah,
Let's focus on improving quality of life overall.
totally agree.
So that's it for part 2 of our deep dive into botulinum toxin for overactive bladder.
Oh.
Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll wrap things up and talk about some interesting directions for future research. We've really dug deep into this topic of using botulinum toxin for overactive bladder.
You have.
We've talked about how effective it is,
Mm-hmm.
what happens over time,
Yeah,
and even how this condition affects people, not just physically, but emotionally.
absolutely. It's complicated.
It is complicated,
Oh.
but as with any research, there are always more questions.
Of course, always more to learn.
What are some of the things you think future research should focus on in this area?
Well, I think we need to figure out why exactly the effectiveness decreases over time,
Yeah.
especially for the folks with MS. Is it something biological happening? Can we tweak the treatment somehow to make it keep working as well as it did at the beginning?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm really interested in the psychological side of things, too.
Oh, yeah, me too.
We talked about how tough it can be emotionally.
Yeah.
to live with OAB, but I think there's so much more to learn there.
Absolutely.
How do people manage day to day? What really helps them cope?
Exactly.
What kind of support systems are most effective?
Yeah, those are great questions. I'd love to see research that focuses on the patient's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
We need to hear from people living with OAB about their experiences.
Yeah,
What are their challenges? What are their successes? What works for them?
those real stories.
Yeah, those
Yeah.
real stories are so important. Not just for the researchers, but for other people who are going through the same thing.
I agree. Just knowing that you're not alone can
It-
make a big difference.
Huge difference. And we can't forget about the healthcare providers either.
Right.
They need to know how to address the mental and emotional side of OAB,
Mm-hmm.
not just the physical symptoms.
It's all connected.
It is. I think training programs for doctors and nurses should focus on communication skills,
Yeah.
empathy, and really understanding the impact of OAB on people's lives.
I think that's so important. And what about support groups
Oh, yeah.
or online communities?
That's a great point.
Do you think there should be more research into how effective those are?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, connecting with other people who get it, who
Mhm.
understand what you're going through,
Yeah.
that can be so powerful.
It can be.
It can make you feel less alone, more supported.
Right. It's like building a community
It's
where everyone
different.
understands.
Yeah, a community of support.
OAB can be so
Yeah.
isolating. But when you connect with others,
Yeah,
it makes a huge difference.
it really does.
So as we come to the end of our deep dive
Yeah.
on botulinum toxin for overactive bladder,
Yeah.
I hope this has given everyone listening a better understanding of this condition
I hope so.
and the potential benefits and challenges of this treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe even more importantly,
Yeah.
it sparked some new thoughts about how we can better care for people living with OAB.
Right. Taking care of the whole person.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Not just focusing on the physical,
Absolutely.
but the mental and emotional aspects too.
100%.
Because at the end of the day, it's about improving quality of life,
That's what it's all about.
helping people live their best lives possible,
Yeah.
even with these challenges.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
That means we need to keep asking questions.
Yes.
Keep learning, keep listening to the experiences of people living with this
Absolutely.
and advocating for the best care possible.
I agree. And that's why we do what we do.
That's right. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
And until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and remember, knowledge is power.